So in order to do this, we'll be using a fair amount of power mapping. As you can see in the blurred images above, basically a quick word on those. Blue means moderate or technocrat. Red means extremist or ideological actor, and purple means in between. Additionally, the lighter red or lighter blue, an actor or individual, that indicates their level of moderation or technical or ideological commitment. So for our paper, me and Professor Liao have been using a framework of punctuated equilibrium. Now, what punctuated equilibrium is, it essentially thinks of politics as an ecosystem. And realistically, we'll be looking at and comparing two ecosystems today in the form of Zhongnanhai and the pre-war Imperial Japanese civil military elite. Essentially, what happens within the framework of punctuated equilibrium is that you have a punctuation, a period of flux, and then regrowth in the start of a new equilibrium, and then finally a new equilibrium sort of establishes itself. And this, in its way, is sort of the yin and yang of politics and political coalitions and political systems. So our research question delves into essentially, again, Zhongnanhai and Tokyo, the Imperial Japanese civil military elite, but more specifically, we look at these two elite castes, and we notice two things. Both were seized upon by violent political punctuations in their political equilibriums, and both of these resulted in what I'm coining, or maybe I have, taken this from somewhere and it's bubbled up from my subconscious, ideological state capture. And put simply, what we're really looking at, and the question we're really asking is, why did China survive? Why was Zhongnanhai able to right the ship? And why was Imperial Japan not able to do so? More specifically, if you look at these images right over here, the violence, we're talking about the violence of the Cultural Revolution from 1960, and again, the Cultural Revolution was incredibly violent for 10 years. However, the real horrible violence, when you get the threat of civil war and the massacres in Guangxi and the Wuhan incident, that happened from about 1966 to 68, and after that you get a sort of new political equilibrium established. And then realistically, the worst violence in Japan in terms of interstate violence, that happens from 1931 to 36. And as we can see here, this is a picture of Japanese General Jotaro Watanabe, and he was killed after the February 26th incident, which ended this period of right-wing violence from young military officers, the Sakurakai, the Cherry Blossom Society, who were an extreme rightist flip within the Japanese army. Now, as you can see here, this is our timeline. And afterwards, I'll try to make this available to as many of you as possible. But basically, the crux of our argument rests in this. In China, the rise of ideological actors within the state following this violent punctuation of political equilibrium happens, and sort of it crescendos from about 1969 to 1971, and then after the Liao incident, Zhou Enlai is able to say to Mao, hey, we got to get some of the people who are actual technocrats who know how to run the government back in the party. And so technocratic, the sort of fortunes of technocratic actors, the old guard of the Long March, begin to rise, and there's a little bit of kerfuffle in here, but eventually, as we will see later, key members of the Zheng and Hai clique are able to oust the Gang of Four, thus creating a new political equilibrium on which the Chinese state, the modern Chinese state, is founded. And this brings Deng Xiaoping to power. Now in Japan, this is the key period of violence. We see the rise of the sort of ideological equilibrium. And we see for Japan, the critical decision is here in 1941. And this coincides with the rise of and the absolute peak of the power of ideological actors within Japan. And from that point, the damage is done. And while there is an attempt to right the ship in 1944, the damage is already done. You can't really do anything. The Japanese army is destroyed. The Japanese navy has been destroyed at Midway. And even during the debates here, as we will see later, the War Party and Peace Party in the Supreme War Council in Imperial Japan are equally divided. There's 3 on one side and 3 on the other. Even after 5 years of what I would call, more than 5 years. Because since starting since 1937, you have the war in China. So many years of what I would call apocalyptic war that has eaten away at the Japanese ability to make war and sort of function as a state. Even at this point, you still have a war party within Japan that is able to influence policy. However, the atomic bombings, again, sort of move Japan in a direction of surrender, and we get the famous Imperial decree of endure the unendurable. Now, the violent punctuation of the Cultural Revolution really begins during the Lushan Conference, right? Where after the horror of the Great Leap Forward, you have key members of the Politburo in the form of Peng Dehuai and Yang Xianzhen. I apologize if I say these wrong. Transliteration from Chinese English is hard. And they challenge, the emperor here in private and in public. And in response to this, Mao purges these figures. Despite this, however, you still have a key core, especially in the form of Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoqi, and Deng Xiaoping, of technocratic actors, men who had fought the Civil War, who had been a part of the Chinese state for many years, and you have Mao taking a step back from governance. Now, there were rumblings against this start in around 1962, in which Mao starts to become disillusioned with Liu Shaoqi. But again, up until 1966, the coalition around Zheng and Hai, and this is simplified, is the political coalition underneath Mao Zedong is still, you have this very big block of technocratic individuals, and then you have Kang Sheng and Jiang Qing, who are sort of whispering in Mao's ear and saying, "Hey, they want to overthrow you. They want to make China rightist. They want to take the capitalist road." Now, in Imperial Japan, things are a little different, and it is in
indicative of the incredible complicated nature of pre-war imperial Japanese politics, that these are simply the military coalitions. There are the aristocratic and political elite, which tend to align with the treaty faction, the moderate treaty faction in the Navy, they're not included here. They will be included on a further slide. But and again, this is like, again, it is incredibly complicated. And what we can see here is there are 5 key blocks within the military, and each of these blocks represented a constituency that any democratically elected government had to satisfy, because of the fact that the Japanese Navy and the Army had veto power over under the Meiji Constitution, under coalition within the Japanese government. And so because of this, you can see there's one moderate coalition, or one moderate constituency, one less radical, but still extremist constituency. Here you can find officers of the Kwantung Army, famous for incredible war crimes. Here, I think here, and then in the far more extremist camp, you find links to Kitaiki, and again, also something that's interesting is that all but the Imperial Way faction had links to the imperial aristocracy. You can see that Prince Chichibu was aligned with the young officers. Prince Sayonji Kenmochi, who died in 1941, was a key figure as he was Genro and able to nominate governments. Prince Kanoi Fumimaro and Suzuki Kantaro, each one of these 3 people are childhood friends of the emperor. And each of them is able to prevail upon him in private and say, hey, these people in the army are nuts. We gotta do something to constrain them. And because of that, this coalition, alongside the more moderate aristocracy and the Seiyokai Party elite, are able to keep nominating governments. And this happens up until about 1939. Now, this is sort of a simplified version of all the political coalitions. Now, as you can see here, 1936 is especially important because it shakes up this political equilibrium, in that it allows these members of the military to purge most of this right-wing faction, and as you can see here, many of these key members who we were talking about before, for example, Suzuki Kantaro during the 1936 insurrection is time? 6 minutes? Okay. Suzuki Kantaro is he is able to Suzuki Kantaro, he barely escapes with his life because from an assassination attempt of these radical officers. Now, and so again, from 1936 to 39, this is the decision-making period. However, by 1941, the Fleet faction, or the Treaty faction, my apologies for the typo there, is below them in the decision-making hierarchy, and the only thing they can think to do to sort of save Japan is to, in their first move against the United States, make it as destructive as possible to knock it out of the war as both a psychological and military blow. And this is why Pearl Harbor is so destructive, and in turn, this mobilizes the United States to war, which also in turn dooms the Japanese state. And again, this is a visualization of that hierarchy. And again, this is after Saipan. You can see the members of the Supreme War Council, right? With the circles here, 3 and then 3. And Emperor Hirohito has to break the deadlock. Now, in Zhongnanhai, things are a little different. Even at the height of the Cultural Revolution, while this radical coalition very much controls government, Zhou Enlai is still there. He's still able to influence policy, and because he has that relationship with Mao Zedong, as someone who had been on the Long March, he is able to say to his old buddy Mao, hey, maybe we gotta do some, we gotta, do some things to make sure the state doesn't collapse. And Mao Zedong himself critically, while engineering many of the worst crimes of the Cultural Revolution, he also saves key people alongside Zhou Enlai, like Deng Xiaoping, while allowing his key adversary Liao Shenqi to perish. And so after the Lin Biao incident, you see the rise of Ye Jianyang. Deng Xiaoping is eventually rehabilitated, and you see more of a moderate clique returning to government, alongside links to key military officials here, who had a more radical ideological bent. However, they were also pragmatic, and in the case of these two, had brutally suppressed Red Guard movements as local garrison commanders. And in turn, after Zhou Enlai and Mao Zedong die, you get a different situation. You get this situation in which this coalition unites to kick this coalition out of power. However, the coup against the members of the Gang of Four by the technocrats in Zhongnanhai, the moderate Maoists, was really the first, the one that gets talked about a lot. There was actually another coalition against these figures, and actually was led by Deng Xiaoping. And his plan was in turn to link up with local garrison commanders to try and sort of come hell or high water, kill every last one of these people. In turn, the Gang of Four was mobilizing popular militia linked to the Cultural Revolution. Thank you. Especially in and around Shanghai. And so, realistically, had this coalition not acted, we would have seen a civil war in China. But because Zhou Enlai brought these key actors in and preserved the lives of men like Deng, key technocratic actors were able to right the ship when you get to the 1976. So key conclusions and takeaways. At key moments, Zhou Enlai, and to an extent Mao, protected key moderates, rehabilitated them and kept ideological forces in check. One interesting counterfactual is what might have happened had the Soviet Union and China in 1969 gone to war. Both had nukes pointed at each other, and this is also at the height of ideological power. And then again, these key moderates were able to oust ideological elements and prevent a civil war between Deng and the Gang of Four, and also bring in a new equilibrium after this coup by 1978, which allows Deng and the reformers to start modernizing China, leading to this Chinese miracle. And then again, in terms of contemporary relevance, we see perhaps an ideological state capture in the cult of Xi. That's my presentation. I apologize for the many, many graphics.
Okay, we have three very interesting presentations on different topics.